Hey, I reached a new checkpoint on my way to create a thought medium supported by a huge graph of knowledge and logic. Important part, logic. I want to be able to describe behaviors and have that work, have that run. I decided to make the logic in a sort of DAG, in a black box that takes an input and returns an output. Anyway, the output, how I write this currently is just directly creating this graph kind of structure with YAML format. So I have some output that takes some user provided input and for instance the number 2. And then I want to get the answer somehow, but it's usually a little bit more complicated than that. But anyhow, when I actually try to visualize this graph, it looks something like that. Well, yeah, that's a lot of nodes, a lot of messiness. So how do I get my output from that? Actually, I can do that. I can just rerun program and I get all the outputs that I want. Anyhow, to actually make this run, I need to process that big furry mess in multiple different steps. In the end, I would really like to be able to delete all the JavaScript code that I've ever written and only use this kind of graph structure. But to be able to bootstrap it, I need somehow to make some sort of editor using this kind of visual editor to edit its own source, to create the editor with the editor, and then I will finally be able to delete all my JavaScript code and the bootstrapping will be done and I will enter phase 2. But to do this, I need to take all this furry mess that the bootstrap graph and the logic test graph combines into, and I need to flatten it, convert it into some sort of expression DAG, reduce it and find out the data flow order and what the JavaScript function strings actually should be. With all of these pipes figured out, I will be able to just join them together into some sort of JavaScript string that will be executable. And yeah, that is what I've done. So let's look at how this works. So this looks a little bit more easier to read than all of this furry mess, but it's mostly the same. So if you look up here, we got furry mess into some flattened part and into a JavaScript expression DAG. That is what you see here. So we can look at and see what kind of output we want. So one of the outputs takes the number 99 and adds some user provided integer. Interesting. But in our graph, we also describe a more complex chain of events. So let's see here. How would we do this? How would we convert this into JavaScript code? Well, I got an algorithm for that. Let's see how it does. First, it figures out what kind of outputs we actually want and what kind of inputs we need. And just now, it doesn't see any relationship in between them, so they could just do everything at once, but that's not right. So we take our little crawler, this red thing that will walk around the graph and figure out the connections and see how they can join things together. This is our stack, our current processing stack that looks at what kind of nodes it will jump to next. Oh, look at that. So main output goes to the output. So they can be joined together because main output doesn't go to anything else. So it can just be done and once. Let's see what it does. Okay. So because, for instance, this multi-use expression will be used in both the ability to calculate this one and this one, it has to be done before both of those. That's why it gets a different rank. Yeah, but for instance, this one could be calculated in parallel with this other one. Let's go to the end. Well, yeah, so here we got our JavaScript code as well. Work in progress, but still, we got the different functions, and now we have some ranking algorithm to see what kind of input has to be run first. For instance, first we need our input, then we can do both of these in parallel if we wanted to, and after that, these, and these. So we basically got this scheduling as well. Great, then we can just take this, let's see, yep. Yeah, so now we have our pipes. We take those, combine them with some logic wrapper and generate a JavaScript string. I think I got it. got some sort of JavaScript string. No, not the visualization. Temp. Here we go. This is the logic wrapper. Down here we have our pipes with our different functions. And then I added some logic just to test it. I add watchers to all the outputs that I want to see, want to look at. And then I set all the initial input values. And if we do that, we'll see that all the different outputs that we watched will be recalculated. But now let's see what happens if we just update the user input 2. So if we go back to our graph and look, the user input 2 down here goes up to this one. So the second output should probably be recalculated and the output 0, but not the other ones. Let's see. So second output and output 0 was recalculated when user input 2 was changed, but only these. The other values was cached. Very nice. Now I will be able to continue to the next step, to start making the actual DOM nodes, the web interaction, and start creating the graph for the visual editor. Something like this. Some visual kind of editor. You can drag things, close things up. Yeah, that will be nice.